All right, it is 5.
Nope.
All right.
I know where that is.
Okay, it is 5:30, and I will call this policy committee meeting to order. Ms. Dooley, may we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, we may. Amy Levy,
Here.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
Allison Simro. The roll reflects that Allison Simro is absent.
Thank you so much. All right, that moves us to item 1C, approval of our agenda.
So moved.
I will provide a second. So there's a motion and a second to approve our agenda. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to the approval of the meeting minutes.
So moved.
All right, I do have, I will provide a second and open the floor for discussion. Could we adjust one thing, Ms. Dooley? Right after action C, approval of agenda, could we have that to read, move approval of agenda with flexibility in the order that the listed policies are reviewed?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Move approval of the agenda with flexibility in the, and then I'd like to change it to order that the listed policies are reviewed. And Board Member Schneider, are you okay with that adjustment?
That is fine.
Okay, excellent. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, so that brings us to policy 222.1, administrative staff absences, and then we'll roll right into the Rule 1 of that policy. Attorney Love, it's good to see you as always. So let's start with—
Good evening.
Absolutely. Let's start with 222.1. Board Member Schneider, do you have any questions or concerns? I'll go last.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Can I make one comment?
Please.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chair Levy. I just wanted to reflect that from the notes of our last time, we did add towards the bottom of that first page the language in regards to looking at workman's comp. So we have a separate workman's comp policy, but to make note of that within the sequence of policies per our discussion.
Perfect. Thank you for highlighting that, Dr. Kieser. So I just had a couple things. Most of them are cosmetic. That first sentence where it says the Board of Education directs the superintendent of schools to establish guidelines to facilitate policy implementation. And I've noticed that comes up in other policies. I completely agree with it. That is what happens. Is there a reason we need to continuously state that I'm missing?
I mean, it was inserted, I think, to establish the purpose for why the guidelines are there. It's not essential, but it does establish the purpose.
Okay. Board Member Schneider, do you have an opinion on it one way or the other? It's
It seems a little wordy. I'm not sure that it would need to be repeated over and over again.
yeah.
Basically, this is the policy that has been established. I'm not sure that it's necessary to be part of the—
I would tend to agree, and I completely agree with the statement, but I noticed in the next policy it came up again. So I would actually propose that we remove that statement and just start with administrative staff absences due to illness and complete the rest of the sentence unless someone objects to that.
I am fine with that.
Okay, sounds like we are on board. Ms. Dooley, could you make that adjustment, please? And then under a staff member becomes sick with a pandemic disease, the wording of that felt a little awkward to me. It says, in the case a staff. So what I am proposing is that it reads, in the case of a staff member becoming sick. If everyone is okay with that. And then at the end, definitely fine to have, but I'm wondering if there's something that I'm missing. It says that employee will be allowed to use accrued vacation time. It just seemed weird to me that we're like giving permission for people to use their vacation time. Is there a reason that it doesn't read that employee will use accrued vacation time?
The reason for the specific language is that typically accrued time is only used when there's FMLA. And so this provides that flexibility that the sick time is what is used. But in this particular case, we open up flexibility to use that accrued time because otherwise it would not normally be an option on the table.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. That's why we have these discussions. Did you have something else to add, Premier Schneider?
No.
Okay. And then in that, the next portion titled "A staff member must provide care for a child," towards the bottom it says, if it is not possible for the employee to telecommute. So my question is, one, who makes that determination? And should we, as determined by, should we include that in this policy?
Typically, that discussion happens with HR, and it is based in part on their job duties and responsibilities and whether or not that it's within the scope of the work to do it in this hybrid manner.
Right. So is it beneficial, Attorney Love, to include if it is, if it is not possible for the employee to telecommute as determined by the HR designee, or do you feel that's not necessary?
No, I think that would be helpful. Or you could just simply say, if the district determines that it's not possible. So your way, or you just say the district, it leaves it a little more open in terms of who might be able to make that determination.
I appreciate you saying that, but if I'm thinking as an employee, if we include in any language about as determined by, I want someone to point me in the right direction. And district, I think, is, if we're going to be that broad, then we shouldn't include it. But I think if I'm looking at it from an employee perspective, it would be helpful for me to know who makes that determination. It doesn't have to be the specific person, but like what department, what. So is there any problem with saying, if it is not possible for the employee to telecommute as determined by an HR designee or HR staff member?
No, that would be fine as long as those are that's who would be making that decision. I mean, as long as because this will be in the policy,
right.
So then that would be the person who would have to make that determination. So you might want to say as determined by the superintendent or designee.
Okay. Dr. Keiser, is that fine with you?
Yes, that's fine.
All right. All right. Ms. Dooley, did you get that change? Perfect. Thank you so much. And Ms. Sumrall, so good to see you. If you just hit that button if you have something to chime in with. Under the next header, the school or care facility of employee, child / dependent, that one. Again, could we add that to the employee may be able to telecommute as determined by the superintendent or designee, just so we're consistent? And then thank you, Dr. Keiser, for adding that connection to the Workman comp policy, the 532.22. And I pulled that up and made a note. I noticed that throughout the policies that we're going to be reviewing this evening, accumulated sick time in many cases is crossed out and accrued compensatory time is replaced. So my question is, and we won't address it tonight because it's not on the agenda, but one, if someone could briefly explain why that, I'm sure there's a reason for it, and do we need to go ahead and update the workman's compensation policy, because we could put that on our December agenda, if yes.
So the, it's updated language to say accrued compensatory time. In looking at the workman's comp language, it is almost verbatim statutory language, so we can put it on there certainly so that we can have eyes on it, and just provide an update for everyone to take a look at. That would be helpful.
So is it okay? And it's just, it's like 2 sentences long. I'll read it
Right.
real quick. It's a short policy. If receiving benefits from workman's compensation insurance, professional educator members shall be paid the difference between the payment and their regular district salary, provided they have accumulated sick leave. This amount shall be deducted from the accumulated sick leave. So are we okay? Is there a reason why it specifically says that? Because if it is, I don't want to change it.
It would be, we would update it to the accrued compensatory leave. So we would update that language
Okay.
to, and that would be the only update to that.
And then is there a reason it specifically lists professional educator members? So are other employees eligible for workman's comp, or is it just professional educators?
It's in reference to the leave time that's in there. All employees, in my understanding and attorney level, I'm going to look to you for confirmation that workman's comp is available to all of our employees.
Right. Workers' comp is available to all employees, but that policy that you just read is appears to be a supplemental policy that says they get workers' comp, but then they can, there are some policies that provide that you can get workers' comp and it would be supplemented so that you can get your full salary.
And that is because workman's comp only pays 2/3 of your salary, so you would use your sick time to make up the 1/3 difference to get to that full payment, correct?
Correct. And so it sounds from that policy like you are extending that benefit just to professional educators, not to the entire staff.
Correct. Because they have that accrued time.
So is there another employee group within the district that also has accrued compensatory time, or is it just professional educators?
I will have to look into that and bring
So
that
let's just plan to do this. For our December 1st meeting, if we could put policy 532.22, I don't think it's going to impact anything that we do tonight. So it's not an emergency, but we'll look to make sure that everything is as it should be with that policy, since it's going to be, period, and because it's attached to this policy. All right. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns, edits for policy 222.1? All right. Would you all like to approve policies individually, or do you want to do this as a group with the policy and the rule? No wrong answer. Okay. Let's just go ahead and look at the rule, and then we can approve to move these on to the full board for a first reading together. All right, so now we are working on policy 222.1, Rule 1, procedures for reporting and processing administrative staff leave. Board Member Schneider, do you have any questions or concerns with the edits that are provided?
I am not. I mean, looking at it, it truly is a procedure and not necessarily a policy. So I agree that it could be eliminated from the policy and just become part of the procedure.
And the reason that we've had past discussions about this, and the reason that there has been hesitation is right or wrong. However, I think you could look at both sides. That we have, as recent as this past year, decided to keep those rules as a part of policy because we believe that it provides a robust explanation and understanding of the policy. So that was the thinking. If we start, we just want to be consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
But thank you for highlighting that. Board Member Simra, did you have any questions or concerns or edits for 222.1 Rule 1? Okay. My only question is under conference attendance, it says the administrator shall obtain approval from their supervisor and enter the absence request in the absence management system. Now, many, many moons ago, when I was an employee of the district, we would always enter it and then you get it approved. So I just want to confirm, has that process changed? You have to get approval and then enter it?
It is basically one in the same system. When you enter it, that it's an electronic approval as opposed to a handwritten form. That used to be the old system.
Yeah, so do we want to say obtain approval and then enter it, or should it be the administrator shall enter the absence request in the absence management system, and then I think it's implied it's either approved or denied?
Yeah, that in essence, because of the way that our system is as of today, yes, that would be the a more efficient way of writing it out.
Okay, so Ms. Julie, we'll have that read for number 1. The administrator shall enter the absence request in the absence management system. Everyone okay with that? All right, and then I am fine with all of the proposed deletions and additions. So I am open to a motion to approve both Policy 222.1 and Policy 222.1 Rule 1 to move on to the full board for first reading.
So moved.
All right, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, now it could get complicated, but it's not going to, because we're going to overview what we're going to do, and then we're going to actually do it. And that will make more sense in just a minute. All right. So for those in the room and following along at home, you will recall that we made the decision to combine Policy 532.3, Professional Educator Leaves and Absences, and Policy 542.3, Support Staff Leaves and Absences. So thank you, Dr. Kieser, to your team for getting that nomenclature with the number assignment redone. So those two policies have been combined into Policy 532.41, Staff Leaves and Absences. And if anyone is curious, you may be thinking, well, why didn't you just combine that in the policy that you just edited and approved? Well, the answer to that is the administrative staff absences are in the 200 series for administration, and the policies that we're looking at now are in the 500 series for personnel, and we didn't want to completely confuse everyone. So we kept the 200s with the 200s, 500s with the 500s. Any questions so far? All right. Now, what we also did was Policy 532.3, Rule 1, and Policy 542.3, Rule 1, have now been combined, and they are now Policy 532.41, Rule 1, Guidelines Regarding Staff Leaves and Absences. So we just took 4 policies, combined them into 2 with a new number and new name. Everyone still on the same page? All right, let's pull up Policy 532.41, Staff Leaves and Absences. Board Member Schneider, we will start with you. Do you have any questions or edits?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Simrau, do you have any questions or edits?
No.
All right, I have a couple. So again, we're looking at 532.41. Could we just go ahead for consistency and remove that portion of the Board of Education directs the superintendents and just know that that is understood? So we would actually start with administrative guidelines to facilitate policy implementation and go from there. Does that make sense, Ms. Dooley? Perfect. All right, after that, at the end of the header, building is closed by district, state, or local authorities. I just had a question of what does this mean? To the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. I'm sure there's a reason why that is in there, but it is not abundantly clear to me.
In part, this is some language that is coming out of our current pandemic and saying that all of our jobs are essential, and so the essential job function, it is just to kind of be more explicit that the essential job functions are the things that are going to keep our employees working and employed during these types of leaves or absences, regardless of where they're coming from.
Oh, it is probably me, so I want to be clear about that. That still doesn't make sense to me. Could we, what are you trying to communicate separate from the words that are on this page, and maybe we can loop back? Because to the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I did not do a good job of explaining it. I would have to go and touch base again with Miss Armstrong, who I know couldn't be here tonight, to get more clarification in regards to that specific language.
Okay, or Attorney Love, is that something that we need, or you can
Let
explain?
me see if I can provide an explanation. What this policy is saying is if the building is closed by district, state, or local authorities, that employees who are unable to work because of that closure will still be paid.
Perfect.
So that's the beginning of it. They're going to be paid.
Okay.
But then we say, in the case of an employee who has been deemed to have essential job functions, then we will attempt to have them telecommute. So, for example, when you went to teaching virtually, or you've got payroll people who have to process the payroll, they may be doing that from home. So you look at the functions and you say they're essential functions. So if the building is closed, we may still require them to fulfill their job functions. And because of the nature of the business, because you're a school district, everybody is, when we say to the extent possible, everyone will be considered to have essential job functions. So rather than identifying in your policy, these are the essential workers and these are the non-essential workers, we're going to say that everybody is going to be considered an essential worker. However, we say to the extent possible, because there may be some classifications of employees that you would not have telecommuting. You would not have work that they could perform when the building is closed.
Okay, so thank you, that was helpful, but I'm not quite there yet. So it sounds to me like this statement has two categories. One, we want to classify everyone that we can is essential, because essential employee means you get paid even when the building is closed. And 2, essential also means that you still need to do your job, but then I think it's a separate issue that to the extent possible, we will allow people to telecommute. So am I understanding that correctly, that it's 2 separate issues? One is pay, and the other is the manner in which you do your work.
Those are 2 issues that are addressed in this policy, yes.
Okay.
The only thing that I would say is that the policy is not saying that only essential workers will be paid. What this policy is saying is all of your employees, if the building is closed by government action, district, state, or local authorities, if the building is closed, everybody will get paid as if they were working. However, essential workers will be required to work. So it's not like you're going to be paid to not work. Some people may get paid without providing any work, but if we determine that your duties are essential, then we'll attempt to arrange for telecommuting, is what it says.
Okay. Is everyone okay with this? Because when I read that sentence, that does not say to me what Attorney Love just beautifully explained. Would it be appropriate, Attorney Love, to say to the extent, and I don't have it the way I want it yet, so I'm just going to give you the thought behind it first. To the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. Now, what I want to convey is this means that all essential staff will be paid and expected to complete their job functions. And then I think we handle the telecommute portion where it already is in the policy. Because that would, for me, would make, because I'm like, well, what does that mean? Okay, essential means 1, I'm getting paid. That's good. And essential also means I'm still required to do my job even if the building is closed. Is there a problem with that?
The only potential problem is there may be some employees who won't be expected to do their job.
Essential employees?
Well, no, essential employees or those deemed essential will be required to do their job or some portion of their job. But there may be non-essential employees who won't be required to work but will be paid.
Okay, I think unless I'm missing something, I think we're still okay. Because if we say, to the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. Employees with essential job functions will be expected to execute their job duties and will be compensated during building closures. Now, if I'm deemed to be... Yeah, go ahead.
Could I suggest that where you say, and I didn't write it down, where you say the essential, that they have essential functions, they will be expected to perform their job duties. If we add something like as determined by the superintendent or designee, that then opens it up and allows you to say, these are the duties you have to perform. You don't have to perform any. You have to perform all of them. So you get to designate what it is.
Yeah, I am completely fine with that. Are other board members okay? All right, so let's see if I can remember what I just said. To the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. Employees with essential job functions will be expected to execute their employment duties as designated by, what was the What's that portion?
By the
Attorney-
superintendent or designee.
Okay, as directed by the superintendent or designee, and will be compensated even during building closures. Please.
The case of the essential employees or employees with essential job functions is addressed in the sentence right before that. So do you want to change that sentence to include additional language?
If we could, thank you for pointing that out, Ms. Julie. Could we move this bottom portion to right before that sentence? To the extent possible, if we put that before in the case of employees with essential job functions. And then right before every attempt will be made, confirm that the reason we're designating as essential employees is that means you get paid even if the building is closed.
And I think you're focusing on, I think, the technological glitch. And what on the
So, all right, we're going to run through this. So, under the header of building is closed by the district, state, or local authorities, and Ms. Dooley, stop me if I need to slow down. If a building is closed by the district, state, or local authorities, regular employees who are unable to work due to closure will not forgo. Okay, then now I'm reading this. Can we just take off that last sentence?
I'm thinking that what has just been put together could probably replace this entire paragraph.
I'm a fan of that.
But could you read it one more time just so I can make sure?
Well, okay. So, yes. So what we are proposing is replacing what currently exists under that header with, to the extent possible, all staff will be considered to have essential job functions. Employees with essential job functions will be required to execute those functions as designated by the superintendent or designee and will be compensated even during building closure. You can drop that even. And will be compensated during building closure.
I think we need an intro phrase, that beginning, when a building is closed by the district, state, or local authorities, and then launch into the rest of the paragraph. Because the paragraph that was just crafted only applies in a situation when the building is closed.
Perfect. Ms. Dooley, do you need anything else from us? Okay. Okay. And then if we jump down to a staff member must provide care for a child, to that header, the sentence right after the bold, it says, if it is not possible for the employee to telecommute, if we could just remain consistent as determined, did we say superintendent or designee? Okay.
Superintendent, yes.
Yep, if we could add that in there. Okay, the header, a staff member must provide care for a child. And then right after that bolded information, if it is not possible for the employee to telecommute as determined by the superintendent or designee. And then just a quick question. In two places we have, okay, so if we go down to the next section, accrued sick leave is crossed out. So it says vacation time, accrued compensatory time. But if we go up a little bit, a staff member becomes sick with a pandemic disease. After vacation time, we still have accrued sick time there. Should it be omitted there or?
Oh, it's in both of them too. I was just noticing.
Yes, that was a miss. That should have been
No,
struck.
In 3 spots.
the difference is that the first two are related to illness.
Okay.
And so because it's illness, they're allowed to use their sick leave. The third one is not because of an illness of the employee or child, and therefore sick leave is not going to be allowed. I mean, you could by policy determine you would allow it, but because there's no medical issue, they would not be able to use their accrued sick time.
That makes sense. Thank you, Attorney Love. All right. We did some adjusting with that one. Are there any questions, concerns, or edits for 532.41? All right. Are we okay to move on to 532.41, Rule 1? Board Member Schneider, do you have any questions, comments, or edits for this rule? Any edits or questions or?
Not that I see at this moment.
Okay, thank you so much. Board Member Semrau, do you have any questions or edits or concerns with 532.41 Rule 1?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, I have a couple. So that first sentence, all leaves discussed herein are subject to procedures established by board policy, and should it be and by administrative regulations, or was it meant to say administration? And what I'm thinking is the administration wouldn't develop or establish the policy, but the procedures for enacting the policies would be found in administrative regulations.
Correct, or they could also be outlined by the administration and employee handbook. So it could, to be absolutely clear, board policy, administrative regulation, and by administration, because these are the procedures. So outlining the procedures, if there needed to be nuances, we could also put those within our employee handbook, which would be under the administration.
Okay, so mainly mine was just a question. Are you comfortable with it as is?
I'm comfortable as is because
Okay.
the administrative regs are also under the administration.
Perfect, then no need to change. So when we're looking at the whole thing, if we could go to the very bottom, just how it's set up structurally, it's, okay, okay, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Under staff responsibilities, so we have 1 and then we start over with 1. Should that be like a Roman numeral 1 and then numbers 1? Or how have we, what is our layout practice? Should it be 1 and then bullets, or that just seems odd to?
It is. In looking at the nomenclature, we will renumber it so that'll be like a 1.1.1. So, like for instance, it could. Pardon?
Could you turn your mic on, Ms. Julie?
It has been changed to alphabetic letters.
Okay.
There you go.
Get us in line, Ms. Julie. We trust you to get that structure right. So as it currently reads, 1, and then sub 2, receive and approve / disapprove. Can we put deny? All right. So the Human Resource Department will either approve or deny. If everyone's okay with that. And then 2, I'm fine with. For number 3, and then as you move into number 2, kind of like we discussed the order of operations, do we really want staff members to report it to their supervisor and then put it in the system, or is putting it in the system the way we want them to report it to their supervisors?
For leaves, they will typically make note to their supervisor before putting it in.
Okay.
In that case, yes.
I just wanted to make sure that the policy reflected the practice that we want to see. All right. Now, a bigger view. So it sounds like we're all okay with the header of staff responsibilities, and Ms. Julie is going to restructure it so we're consistent with other policy. I think what's listed as number 1, long leave of absence long-term, that we should actually start with the last one. So it's leave of absence short-term, and then go into leave of absence long-term. And then we'll have educational conferences, workshops, and institutes, unpaid leave of absence short-term, and then unpaid leave of absence long-term. Is everyone okay with that order? Okay. Ms. Dooley, does that make sense? Okay. The very bottom, so we're all okay with staff responsibilities. And then after that, it has number 1, leave of absence long-term. We're saying that should be number 2. And the actual number 1 is the last one on the page that says leave of absence short-term. That makes sense? Okay. So now, while we're working with that leave of absence short-term, I completely get why number 1 is being removed. Can we just make the new number 1, that note that's above it, no prior leave approval form required, instead of having that as a header? Does that make sense? So the note above becomes the new number 1 under leave of absence short term. Does that make sense, Ms. Dooley?
It does make sense, but I think that Ms. Armstrong had this header because both of those leaves did not require an approval, but I think it'll be the same if we changed it.
Well, here, I want that additional feedback. So our new number 1 is leave of absence short term. And as I'm reading this, this says no prior, it's worded, it's kind of oddly put, but what it means is no prior leave approval form is required for this. But for our current number 1 that's going to become number 2, it says leaves prior approval form required. So in this one, it is required. Is that accurate?
Correct. So in those terms, really the long and the short term becomes superfluous because the long term has the forms and the short term do not require the forms. So I would say if we go with that numbering, leaves no prior forms required, we could simply go leave of absence because it's understood that that's a short-term absence because there's no form that's required. Does that make sense?
Absolutely not.
No? Okay.
And it could just be me. I will own it. Okay, so our new number 1 is leave of absence short term. Is there a problem? Ms. Julie, you're throwing up a finger. I need to stop. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so the leaves prior approval form required, all of those listed before leaves no prior approval required, all of those require the form.
Yeah, I think if you combine them, it's a little confusing.
No, I don't want to combine anything. I just want to switch the order. Because like for unpaid leave, we have short term and then we have long term.
Right.
So I get that the first, as it's read, the 1 through, and it's weird because it says 1, 2, 3, 3.
Well, wouldn't we then just put the leaves that don't, just put that up top?
Just let me finish my thought, please. So if we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is labeled 1, 2, 3, 3, and as the number 1 of that, we just put a note, no prior leave form required. So we remove that as the header and we include it under the section. So leave of absence, long-term, educational conference, et cetera. Because for me, it doesn't make sense to have your leave of absence long-term, and then at the bottom of the page, you find out what you need to do for leave of absence short-term. But I'm open if someone else has a different opinion.
I was just thinking that if we just, well, why do we have 2 3s? But I'll get to that. But, well, we just take the short term and put it above the leave prior approval form required as is, so people understand, yes, this is short term, no form is required. If you're going to continue on towards a longer term, that's below.
I'm a fan of being, I completely see what you're saying. I'm a fan of being explicit where we can and not, because no prior, I would rather tell people you don't need a form for this.
Right, and we'll leave that, we'll just move, like, I see what you're saying where the no form, the short term should be first, right?
Yep.
Agreed. So can't we, is there a possible way to take the leaves no prior approval form required and the 1 and move that onto above, just flip-flop them? So it's now, yes, the whole thing. So instead of coming down to 3 responsibilities for staff members, that will be where the leaves with no form approval would be put, and then they would continue on down the list.
That's fine. We have to change the wording though, so no prior leave form or no prior leave approval form required, because leaves no prior approval form required seems very awkward to me.
It does.
I would reword it to say leaves that do not require prior approval form.
And just a quick question. Does anybody know why we have 2 3s?
I'm sure it's just a typo.
Okay.
It's a typo.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to be switching those to alphas, alpha and then numeric. But so there's basically 2 types of leaves. There's one that requires forms, and that's all of the things that are currently at the top here that we've been talking about. So currently where it says leave of absence long-term, conferences, workshops, unpaid leaves, a short-term unpaid leave of absence, and an unpaid leave of absence that is a semester or longer. All of those require prior approval in order for you to access those.
Okay, how about this?
And then the only one that doesn't require is like, I'm a short-term absence because I called in sick.
Okay, how is everyone comfortable with number 1, leave of absence short term? And instead of what is crossed out, it says this type of leave does not require a prior approval form. And then we have the header, the following leaves require an approval form, and then we list them. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, Ms. Dooley, does that make sense? Okay, perfect. All right. So the number 1 at the bottom for short term is going to be bumped up to the top. It will not have a header, but the note that says this type of leave does not require a prior approval form will replace what is crossed out as the number 1. All right. And then we will have a header that says the following leaves require a prior approval form. And then we list those types of leaves, and we start with leave of absence long-term. Look at us. All right, perfect. Now, on leave of absence long-term, my question with number 4 is if a professional educator is requesting sabbatical. So are the only category of employees that are eligible for sabbatical professional educators?
I believe so, but I can double check that.
Okay. And then if yes, my question is why? because when I looked up sabbatical, it says a period of paid leave granted typically to a university teacher or other worker for study or travel, traditionally 1 year for every 7 years worked. So the point to that is if other employee classes are able to take sabbatical, I don't want to exclude them from that option.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Dr. Kieser, for following up on sabbatical. For the new number, Ms. Dooley, I'm going to leave the numbering to you. So educational conferences, workshops, and institutes. My only question is for number, no, actually, I don't have a question with that one. It's the next one, unpaid leave of absence, short term. The number 2 there says approval of the immediate supervisor and the superintendent or designee shall be required at least 5 days in advance of the leave. What is the turnaround time? Because if I need to get approval 5 days, does it need to be submitted 10 days before? Does it need to be submitted 30 days before? And I don't want to make it too specific that it's a burden, but I don't want people to think, oh, well, they should be done in 48 hours, so now I submitted it and it's not done.
Correct. So the unpaid leave of absence would be typically in situations where the employee is going to run out of their accrued time and they still need additional time. So typically we know that this is coming down the pike. I have a lengthy procedure. I only have 10 days and I know I'm going to be out for 20 days. It's a conversation that happens long before that. Typically, what this prevents is someone saying, and just off the top of my head, I don't want to burn my sick days, so I'm just gonna take a day off and put it as unpaid time. So it keeps that as not available for someone to just randomly use. They have to get that prior approval. So it really relegates the unpaid time to those situations in which we have pretty much a heads up long before that 5 days.
So here's my only concern. It says you need approval 5 days, but are you comfortable with not having a when it needs to be submitted? Because I would think that gives your office, okay, we have time to review it and process.
Typically, it comes in the form of an email to HR and the direct supervisor. So in this case, if it's a teacher, it would be the principal and then the HR director, and at the same time, and it's a pretty quick turnaround time.
Okay, so you're comfortable with not
Yeah.
including, okay, perfect. And then just on under number 4, the superintendent or designee, if we could just cross out 4, so to read the superintendent and designee may limit.
Okay.
And then my other question is on unpaid leave of absence long-term. Number 4, notification to return to employment must be made in writing by February 1st. Is there a reason there's that date there, or would you be more comfortable if it's a period of time before your return, like 3 months prior to? Because since long-term leave of absence could be a semester or more, it may not make sense for everyone to have that February 1st deadline.
February 1st fits into the staffing calendar, so this will allow us to know if there is a position, if we have a person who is out and is notifying us that they'll be, I just want to reread this to make sure yes, of return of employment, we put them into the staffing plan. So it's not like we're going to hire a long-term or a limited-term employment, a 1-year contract for a person, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, I'm going to come back. They let us know so that we build it into the staffing plan.
Okay, perfect. All right. So any questions, comments, or concerns with 532.41 Rule 1? So my only other question is, are we okay with moving this on to the full board for first reading? And typically we do a first reading and then 2 weeks later we have a second reading and just give Dr. Kieser time to check on sabbatical? Or do we want to hold it until we get confirmation on that sabbatical information and then send it to the full board? Does the committee have a preference?
I think it makes sense to have him fix the sabbatical, so we're not,
So you want to hold it in committee before it goes? Okay. Board Member Shire?
That's fine.
All right, perfect. So we've done a lot of good work. Should not feel like time wasted. So once we get that sabbatical information, and Dr. Kieser, is it reasonable to have that for the December 1st meeting?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we will plan on doing a final review with the sabbatical information. Do we want to hold policy 532.41 and the rule together?
I think that makes sense.
Okay. All right, sounds good. We will complete that on the 1st. All right, everyone, we have gotten to the easiest portion of the night. Let me just double check one thing. Okay, so our last two policies, the recommendation that we had discussed at the previous meeting is to eliminate them because they are now contained in other policies. I think we need to revisit, okay, so for policy 542, let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yep, 542.31. One second. Okay, so policy 542.31, non-paid short-term leave of absence. So this, the recommendation is that it's removed and combined with policy 542.3 and policy 542.3 Rule 1, but it actually should say, because those policies were merged, remove and combine with policy 532.41, staff leaves and absences, and policy 532.41 Rule 1, guidelines regarding staff leaves and absences. Ms. Julie, were you able to get that?
Yes.
Perfect. And then the same issue on the next policy, 556.2, the note on that policy, and Ms. Simrod, the reason why that note is important because we don't delete policies, we retire them and just house them in a separate section. So that note should say removed and combined with policy 532.41 and policy 532.41 Rule 1. All right, so Ms. Julie, can you confirm that both of those notes have been adjusted?
I will adjust them, yes.
Thank you so much. All right, is there a motion to retire policy 542.31, non-paid short-term leave of absence for support staff, and also policy 556.2, non-paid short-term leave of absence for administrative support staff?
So moved.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. All right, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, committee. Thank you, Attorney Love. Thank you, Dr. Kieser. I would like to take a point of personal privilege and to thank our colleague, Board Member Anderson, for his service on the board. He has decided to step away from this committee, and we are excited to welcome Board Member Simrau. So thank you for agreeing to serve on this committee, and of course, we're ecstatic to have Board Member Schneider as well. We have a great team, so I'm excited about the work we're going to continue to do. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, December 1st at 5:30 p.m. We will look at that workman's comp policy. We will look at the policy that we are laying over until we can get confirmation on the sabbatical information. And then we will start moving into the 800 series for review. And I am sure Dr. Kieser and his able team will get those out well in advance. So unless there's anything else, thank you to the students who are here in person. Hopefully we didn't keep you too long, but we appreciate always. Tell a friend, you're always welcome at our board meetings and our committee meetings. All right. Is there anything else that we need to cover? All right, I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, that motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.